Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I am back with another emergency card video. As promised, I have a new pop-up mechanism for you. We are going to create some inside, outside, flippy business. Help me name this. I'm not sure what to call it. So this is part of kit 42 that came out in the middle of August. We have Get Well sentiments as circle sentiments, and then same size but without the printed circle, rectangle sentiments. And then we have strip sentiments in 4 different fonts. They're about 1/4 inch wide, and I'll show you how to trim those down later in this video. There was also a card sketch at the very back of that free printable, and I promised there would be new pages today, and there are. But let's be clear, we did a fun fold in our intro video. So one fun fold and one that just uses this sketch. Today we'll be pulling sentiments from kit 27 that came out in the spring. It has a magical and wizardly theme. And then kit 17 from last fall, it's the more holiday sentiments. And then today we're adding to kit 42 with 2 new pages showing you how to make these pop-up mechanisms for 2 different cards. If you're interested in any of these free printables, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. So click that button and ring the bell to be notified every time there's a new free kit. All right, you got a quick peek at the beginning, but let's slow this down a little bit. This card has a flipping mechanism that pulls that sentiment from the front to the inside as you open the card. So I am just starting with a standard A2 card base, right? So it's 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches, scored at 4 1/4. I have adjusted the card sketch slightly to make it easier to show you the mechanism. In this sketch, this was a 1-inch strip. Well, now it's 1 1/4 inches. I still want those little margins in between, and so I have cut this one down from 3 inches to 2 3/4 inches. Both are 5.5 inches tall. So I have 2 columns of cardstock, really simple. These are from Echo Park. I'll try to link them below. And then instead of having 3 rectangles, I'm going to do just one. I'm looking to position this so there's enough room at the bottom to grab the card from the corner and not get hung up on this flipping mechanism. But I do like it kind of towards the bottom. It's also going all the way on the right-hand side. So I'm going to open this up and I am going to cut right along that sentiment mat until I reach the edge of that purple pattern paper. It's 1 1/4 inches, so you need a 1 1/4 inch cut. I'm actually going to take this off and put it on the inside because I feel more comfortable cutting that direction because I'm right-handed, but you can do whatever is comfortable for you. I need to make sure that it's not narrower than that rectangle. That's just a standard sentiment mat, so it's 2.5 by 1.5. Then I'm going to bring this into my scoreboard and I'm scoring at 1 1/4 inches. It should be right along the edge of that pattern paper. And I'm going to fold it towards the middle of my card. I just made a flap, okay? Really simple. All I used was my scissors, right, and my eyeballs to place it somewhere on the edge. I'm going to go ahead and glue my sentiment mat onto that flap, but only the part that flips inside. I don't want to glue that flap shut so that it doesn't move anymore. I'm going to decorate this card like a fairy tale. I have 2 die sets that we're using today. This first one is the Fairy Tale Carriage, and it's not very big, right? It's a smaller die set. I love that that brings the price point down a little bit. And this is part of, I think it's the storybook collection from Spellbinders. They released a whole bunch of stuff that's great for scrapbooking and just for like telling stories about families. And so I wanted to put them to use on a card because I don't scrapbook because I would have to take pictures first and I always forget. This is really simple to put together. I have layered up all of my pieces too thick because parts of this are going to be hanging out in mid-air and I don't want anything to get crumpled since it's probably being given to a child. When I go to add the wheels on, there's a curly cue on the bottom that the center of the wheel lands on, and then I'm trying to add glue just where it's going to overlap the carriage as well. Again, the very bottom of the wheels hanging out in midair. I feel like that's kind of how I'm traveling through life right now. Part of the bottom, just hanging out in midair. But look how cute it is. Oh my goodness. Then this is the Castle Tails, and I wasn't sure about this one, but I'm speechless. You guys know I'm never speechless. This turns out so beautifully. I ink blended just a little on either side of the pieces of the castle just to create that illusion of roundness. And I was going to do that roundness on the tops. And quite frankly, I didn't have the patience for it. So they just ended up with, you know, a little darker purple in some spots. Doesn't matter. I cut some scraps of darker gray cardstock to go behind so that it creates that sort of dimension you would see on a crenellated castle wall. And I love that. So I did it for all three. And then we're just going to piece this together. I love that you guys, when I asked, said you like to see the assembly of the die cuts. I really love this part of card making. I know it's not for everyone. And if you're not a die cutter, cool. Like use some stamped images or use ephemera, whatever makes you happy. You can make a pop-up card like we're about to do with pattern paper and ephemera. I promise you. So hopefully there are techniques in here that will work for everyone. You also don't have to decorate this for like a princess fairy tale something. I'll tell you what, I only have a couple of people in my life that this card might go to, but it turned out so cute. I might make an extra one or two and then they can each have one. I'm adding on these gold foil details. I'm using the Treasured Cardstock collection in gold from Spellbinders that I've been raving about. It has 15 sheets with 5 different textures or sheens of gold, and the price point is like $1.50 higher than a standard pack of cardstock, and you get more cardstock. So I just am so thrilled that there's affordable specialty cardstock out there. I will link it below because it comes in gold, silver, and in rose gold. And you can get it just about everywhere, right? All the big stores are carrying it, so it's really easy to get a hold of and like stick into an order where you're already paying shipping for something. Okay, so I'm gonna open my card up and I took my rectangle and I flipped it towards the inside so that I could see this entire stretch of pattern paper, and it was just easier to try to lay everything out this way. The cloud dies came from a set called Up in the Air View, and it's got fun stuff in it. Some grass, an umbrella, a kite, like a balloon, a heart balloon, and some other fun stuff to create an outdoor scene. And they worked beautifully here because they're nice and puffy. I picked up my die cuts with my sticky mat and I tried to stick it in the bottom left corner based on the pattern paper. There's like a line printed on there that I lined up with the paper. But the bottom of this mat isn't straight. This is just a scrap, and I didn't realize that when I went to put everything down. So my castle ends up a little bit crooked. I'm just gonna move everything. This is the beauty of wet glue. It's gonna be fine. But it was easier to me than trying to pick up pieces one at a time and get them right down where I had them before. I will stick my glue bottle underneath where die cuts overlap because those puffy clouds definitely have a lot of overlap and I don't want them going anywhere. All right, let's make our pop-up. This piece is 3.5 by 1 1/4. I'm going to score at 1/4 inch from each side. So 3 1/4 inches. And then actually I was more confident kind of folding that back on itself and putting that fold into the left-hand side of my scoreboard. And then I'll score 1/4 inch from the right-hand side. So at 3 inches this time. We're making a little table, right? 2 stubby little legs and a big long flat part. That's it, that's the mech. So I made another one out of craft cardstock just so you could see it a little better. So I'm drawing a line over the score lines that I've made. I need those score lines to line up with the score line on the flap and the score line that goes down the middle of my card, okay? When I fold my legs under, I need this to be the exact same width as the section between those two score lines. If either of those things is off, this will not work right. So I'm going to put glue on one of my flaps. They're the same, so it doesn't matter which one. I'm just smoothing it out so the glue doesn't ooze out and things get glued shut. And I'm going to put that flat right up against the score line, and I will fold that flap onto it. When the sentiment flap faces the front of the card, my mechanism is folded. When it faces the inside of the card, the mechanism is flat. This is really, really important. So then here's my other flap, and I'm sorry, this is pink on pink, and I get that that's hard to see, but that's how it disappears, right? And it doesn't draw a ton of attention to itself. That's gonna fold back under and glue to the other side of the card, but there's an easy way to do it. I want the sentiment flap facing the front of the card. That's really, really important. Then I will fold it, and that little 1/4 inch flap should line up right against the score line in the middle of the card. I'll add my glue and then fold my card shut. You absolutely, positively, definitely want to secure your mechanism this way. And then while that glue is still a little bit wet, check it. Make sure that your flap opens. Make sure that your card opens. Make sure that everything's moving the way it's supposed to before trying to move the mechanism would tear your card, okay? Just keep moving the card and making sure it works. When I open this up, you can see the mechanism a little bit, so we're gonna put the carriage on it. This craft scrap is right along that center score line. I need to make sure that the carriage doesn't overlap that score line at all, or when I close the card, it will get crumpled. So this is gonna tuck ever so slightly underneath the sentiment flap. That's okay, totally fine. But it needs to not cross that center score line. I'll press that down and make sure not to put glue at the top or bottom. I'm just tucking my fingers back there and feeling around, making sure it's not wet back there. Then this is the Perfect Touch rectangle die set. We'll use this on the next card as well. It just creates a little bit of texture and piercing detail around the outside edge, and I love that. So I'm gonna glue that down to my card. And then we're gonna add one more detail to the inside. If you're gonna make a pop-up, you might as well go all out. So there's a bunch of these word dies, and I love the font. This one says magic. I thought it went with our magical castle carriage. You know what's going on here. So I cut it using the shadow and the words to make this little frame, and I'll just glue that on there. And then I did it again on some darker cardstock, but I put some double-sided adhesive from scrapbook.com behind there. It comes in a 2-inch roll. It's pretty affordable, and keep an eye on it because you can get it for 40 or 50% off most of the time. Don't pay full price for that. I lost a little bit of my footage here, but I just stuck all the stickers right into the shadow. These are strip sentiments, and I had already cut a bunch of them. You cut from the bottom tick mark to the top, and you make sure you keep them connected at the very top. So you have flaps. That way you can connect the side tick marks and separate them into 2 1/4 by 1 1/4 inch sentiments. This one says, wishing you a day fit for a princess, and it opens and closes beautifully. I love how that sentiment flips to the inside. It's so much fun. So let's take a look at card number 2. This is Dancin Douglas. You guys, I'm obsessed with this tree. And then you open it up, and we're using a very similar mechanism, but we have a panel in the middle that's gonna flip to the inside. And then we actually have a secondary pop-up. What looks like our sentiment mat on the inside is actually something else. So we'll get there a little later on. But I've got to tell you about this tree. He showed up in the coming soon a little earlier than dies sometimes do, and I was just watching him and watching and waiting. I just got him, like he just came in last week. So I am stacking up his legs 4 deep. It's 100-pound cardstock. If you're going to make a Dancin die, the heavier the legs are, the better it will swing. So I like to really stack them up. He comes together super easily. I just add a bunch of wet glue on the legs. I don't even worry about getting them all aligned until all of them are sort of in my hand, and then I press them together. Then we have these little boots. These can make little elf shoes. You can absolutely repurpose them for something else. I can imagine using this to have like elf legs sticking out from underneath something naughty that he's gotten into. I think that'd be a lot of fun. For the greenery, I wanted a little bit of ink blending just at the tops of these pieces. They're going to overlap a little bit. If I had this to do again, I'd pick a slightly darker ink. It looks great now, but part of that's because it's wet, and so when it dries back more than I kind of want. Also, my ink pad desperately needs to be re-inked, so the medium shade instead of the light one would have worked a little bit better. There are debossed details at the tops of each of these tree pieces that show you where the next one goes. There is no guessing here. I was a little worried that this was going to be tricky to put together, and it wasn't, right? I found it was easiest to just hold it in my hand to get the angle right so I could see that debossed detail. When it comes to arms, I like to put glue on the arm or the whatever's going to be in back and then lay my bigger piece on top of it. I feel like I have more control over where everything's going to end up when I do it that way. These eyeballs. You guys, they're so goofy and cute. Sometimes eyeballs for critters and all sorts of things end up kind of creepy. Not these. So I'm also going to be repurposing the eyes for this. There are two little mittens. The mitten will cover the entire hand. And then there's a little piece that goes at the cuff. And if you didn't want to fiddle with that, you could skip it. You could hit that with your gel pen, or you guys, I just got some Ohuhu acrylic pens. You guys know there's all kinds of companies that have them now, and I've just been testing them out, but so far I'm super impressed. And you could just cover right over that, and it is opaque and beautiful, and there's a bunch of metallics in the set too. I'll show them to you soon, I promise. Then to finish up my tree, I added a bunch of ornaments. I like the two pink ones that also kind of look like rosy cheeks. I think it's super cute. Today we're going to make a 5x7 card. I don't do this very often, but Douglas is a chunky monkey, and so he needs a fair bit of space. This is from the Perfect Touch dies. It's 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and so I'm just going to position that with removable adhesive at the top of my card. Then I cut a scrap that is 2.5 inches, and I'm placing that right against the score line so I know where the halfway point is. I need to cut around half of my rectangle, just half. And so that scrap cardstock is telling me how far to go. And then I will use that rectangle as a guide and my ruler, and I'll just line it up along the rectangle. I'm using a craft knife here, but you absolutely could do some partial die cutting. This is a 5x7, and so I know a lot of people don't have a 7-inch opening on their die cutting machine, so that's why I didn't do it that way, but that's an option. Or if you have a sliding blade trimmer, you could just trace around half of this and then bring it into that trimmer and do it that way. This was what was easiest for me. I'm very comfortable with this craft knife. I just use medium pressure and do a couple of strokes instead of trying to muscle all the way through it on the first go round. I opened this up and thought for sure I'd have to fix the corners, but no, look at that. My flap opened perfectly. I'm going to bring this to my trimmer, and I want to score this right in the middle of the card. So I'm just using my ruler to find that center, that 2.5-inch line. And I'm going to score from one cut mark to the other, not the whole half of the card, just this little flap, okay? Because it needs to fold to the inside. It's kind of like the sentiment flap we had on the first one. Then I have another piece of this Perfect Touch rectangle, and this one's some shimmery cardstock. So I'm going to layer this up because it's only about 65 pounds, and I wanted to make sure this is nice and sturdy. Half of it hangs out in midair. I put these backsides to backsides so that both of the pretty sides are showing. Does it matter? Maybe not, but definitely if you're going to do that, double check and make sure it's going to work. Once I had them glued together, I was making sure that it was going to move well in and out of the opening that I'd made. And I think I glued them ever so slightly off. So I am going to tuck that flap to the inside of the card and bring in my ruler. And I'm going to shave just a tiny sliver off of the bottom. I mean, tiny. You could make it a little bigger, but I don't want you to be able to see to the inside of the card. So you can see how small that is, right? I'm just removing a little bit of extra, and that's easy enough. I'll double check, and things are moving a lot better now. So I can go ahead and glue this together. I'm going to put glue only on the flap, right? So not the entire front of the card, just the flap that rotates in and out. Then I will line this up right inside the opening, making sure I'm not going to overhang the flap. If I do, I'm going to have a hard time getting it through there. I'm going to have a little resistance. It'll catch. Okay. Next, let's make our mechanism. This is 3 inches by 1 1/4 inches, and I'm going to score 1/4 inch from each side. Okay. So it's the same mech, but the sizing is different because our fold is in a different spot. This card actually has 2 mechanisms in it. So we're going to call this one the pop-up. This is 3 inches by 1 1/4, and we're scoring it 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and 2.5 inches. All of these are in the printable, okay? So if you're like, I can't take all these notes, they're in the printable. It just folds up like a little box. So we're starting with the mechanism we're familiar with. I added a little glue onto that 1/4 inch flap, and I will lay it flat right against the score line where that flap is. Okay, it is flat. Then I press the flap onto it. It's all the way up in there, okay? When I flip that to the front, then the mechanism folds and the end of it should end up right at the center score line of our card. So here's that other flap, right? 1/4 inch flap. And I'm going to add glue only onto that little flap. I want to make sure the mechanism is going to move well, so I will fold the card closed on top of it. This is the position I want everything in when the card's in the envelope. I will open that back up and just check and make sure that my panel flips well, that the card closes well, that nothing is buckling. You can see our little table in there. And that has done essentially what we did in the first card. Because our panel is so big, it covers up most of the mech, but I want something to pop out onto the other side. So this is 2.5 by 1.5 inches. It is a standard sentiment mat. Not all of it's going to show, but that's what this pop-up is for, okay? So I'm going to label these A, B, C, and D. I'm skipping B and C so I don't have to erase anything. The A is one of the 1-inch sections. I'm adding glue onto A and D. D is a 1/2 inch section. Then I will fold this in half and I'm going to tuck it right against where the mechanism meets the rotating flap. Okay, it's just like installing the first mech. I'm going to pop this up a little bit so you can see it better. But here it is, and I'm going to freeze this for you. Side A is glued to the back of the flap. Side D is glued to the top of the mech. Okay, and when that pops up, side B right here can hold this other piece, and it hides it when it's closed, and then when I open it, it will rotate on top of the panel on the right. So I just added glue onto B, and then I will press everything open to get that glue to adhere. And then that's it. I'm going to freeze this for you one more time. There it is. I have it right on top of that box. And you can see how now that crosses over the center score line to create a really fun, really interesting mechanism. So here's my card. I'm opening and closing. I'm making sure that everything's moving the way I want. And once it does, I'm going to glue it flat to my table. I've got tape on there so it doesn't move because I need to install Douglas. I put double-sided foam tape on all of the top of him. I want to make sure he fits entirely on that rectangle. If he does not, he's going to catch as we flip this open and closed. I am using the world's best foam tape. It's double thick. I would have to double up any other foam tape I used because I have 4 layers of the legs. I am just rounding a piece. It only needs to be kind of rounded at the top to put in the middle where the legs go. And then I want to make sure his legs aren't going to swing so far that they're ending up outside of his body. So I'll add a little bit of foam on both of the tips of the greenery on the bottom. This foam tape is amazing. It's double thick. It's from Pear Blossom Press, and it's also removable for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, it really starts to adhere on there permanently. I've tried to pull it off after the 30 minutes. Not great. But until then, I don't have to stress out and worry that like maybe I'm going to get him put down in the wrong place and I just spent all this time on the pop-up mechanism. Not a problem. And the backing paper comes off really beautifully. So once I get all of that removed, I actually taped the legs to the body so I could treat this as a single piece. I'm using my finger to make sure the top of the tree is inside of the rectangle, okay? And then I will press that down, make sure everything is secure, make sure his legs are swinging like they're supposed to be, and we can work on a sentiment. This is from the More Holiday Sentiments from last fall, and there's some really funny kind of snarky ones on here, which is why I love this one so much. I have lots of sweet holiday sentiments too. I will link to the Emergency Kit holiday playlist below. I just trim them out and then I use the right-hand side of the finger guard to trim off the sides and make sure that they are even. This one says Season's Greetings from the Naughty List. I'm putting it on a 3/8 inch strip of blue cardstock. I make sure the top, bottom, and left-hand side have the same margin, and then I just trim little slivers off the right until it matches too. This is a big card though, so I'm also going to add this onto a 1/2 inch strip of that darker teal cardstock. And I like that it gives it a little more weight for just a 1/4 inch sentiment strip. These again are part of those free printable kits. I put just regular foam tape behind there. I didn't feel like it needed to be double thick, and I will add that centered in the bottom of the card. On the inside, I didn't make this pop up for nothing. So I have, it's a deck the halls, not your family. This is my son Malcolm's very favorite greeting I have ever made. And I printed these at 2 per sheet. That's how I made it small. And I'm going to punch it out with a 1-inch circle. Then I'm going to mat it on a 1 1/4 and 1 1/2 inch circle as well. And I can put those right in the middle of that pop out that sneaks onto the other side of my card. I'm using removable adhesive just in case I'm giving this to a friend who doesn't think I'm as funny as I think I am. And I'm gonna center it right on there, and that will finish up my sentiments. I'm gonna add one more piece with removable adhesive. I'm going to add a piece that is 6 inches by 4 inches. This way I can take that out of the card, write my greeting, and then add it back in there when I know I haven't misspelled anything, because I will. But that finishes up card number 2. My friends, I hope that this inspires you to try a pop-up, an interactive, a flip, a something. I just love cards like this. I would love to know which of these 2 cards is your favorite. If you are interested in the free printable, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. So click that button and ring the bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new free kit. Then when you click more or show more below the video, you'll find all of the videos and printables that we've talked about linked in the description box, along with all of the supplies and instructions for this kit. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.